Aruncarea cu ciocanul, partea 2, from Las Fierbinți, feels less like an episode of a rural comedy and more like a sociological poem about the absurd dignity of small lives. At first glance, it unfolds with the same humor and rhythm that define the show's identity, but the closer one looks, the more the laughter dissolves into tenderness. The story, centered on the continuation of a village hammer-throwing competition, is deceptively simple. It begins with laughter, grows into chaos, and ends in quiet introspection. Yet somewhere in this apparent simplicity lies a profound observation about human nature, community, and the fragile illusions that keep people moving forward even when nothing really changes. Watching this episode feels like looking through a cracked mirror that reflects both the ridiculousness and resilience of life in a Romanian village. The characters are caught between wanting to prove something to the world and knowing deep down that the world has long stopped paying attention to them. The tension defines the emotional pulse of the story. The hammer, in all its absurd importance, becomes the axis of the village's self-awareness. Around it, the characters construct identities, dreams, and rivalries that reveal more about human psychology than about sport. It is this interplay between the comically trivial and the existentially profound that gives Aruncarea cu ciocanul, partea 2, its power. From the first scenes, we sense that this is not really about competition. It is about validation. Every villager, whether throwing, cheering, or gossiping, is trying to find meaning through participation. Branzoa wants to win because winning would justify his stubbornness. Firisel wants to watch because watching gives him the illusion of involvement in something greater than his routine. Celentano, perpetually drunk yet strangely wise, sees through the nonsense but plays along because laughter, in Fierbinți, is a form of survival. Even Aspirina, ever the pragmatist, uses the event as an opportunity to sell refreshments and flirt with advantage. The hammer, heavy and irrelevant, becomes a metaphor for all the weight they carry, the weight of pride, poverty, dreams, and time. One of the most brilliant aspects of this episode is its use of repetition. The act of throwing, failing, arguing, and trying again mirrors the repetitive nature of rural life itself. Every throw looks the same, yet means something different each time, depending on who performs it and why. The villagers' attempts at precision or technique are ridiculous, yet deeply touching. They imitate what they have seen on television: Olympic athletes, professional commentators, ceremonial openings. But the imitation is always flawed, endearing, and strangely authentic. This contrast between imitation and authenticity is central to Las Fierbinți. The series thrives on showing how people internalize external narratives of success and adapt them to their limited circumstances. The village, though isolated, is never disconnected. It receives fragments of modernity through television, politics, or gossip, and turns them into local theater. Aruncarea cu ciocanul, partea 2, captures this process perfectly. It is as if Fierbinți is reenacting a distorted version of civilization, parodying urban ambition in a field of dust and laughter. The humor arises not from mockery, but from recognition. The audience laughs because they see themselves in these small gestures of self-importance, in the ridiculous seriousness with which the villagers treat their game. The cinematography complements this psychological depth beautifully. The camera lingers on faces rather than actions, capturing expressions of confusion, concentration, and sudden joy. There is a certain rawness to how people are framed, sunlight catching the wrinkles, sweat glistening on their necks, hands gripping the hammer like a sacred object. The colors are earthy, the tone nostalgic, evoking that timeless feeling of a place untouched by progress, yet pulsing with vitality. In one of the episode's quiet moments, when the noise dies down and the competition takes a brief pause, the camera captures a panoramic view of the field. The villagers stand scattered, talking, smoking, adjusting their clothes. In the distance, a child chases a ball. Nothing extraordinary happens, yet the moment feels transcendent. It captures what Las Fierbinți does best, finding beauty in the banal. The show never romanticizes poverty or ignorance. Instead, it celebrates persistence. Even when the villagers fail spectacularly, their failure becomes a kind of victory because it affirms that they are still trying. The episode's dialogue is rich with rhythm and subtext. The conversations, seemingly trivial, often carry emotional undertones that speak of frustration, resignation, or longing. When Branzoi boasts about his training methods, it is not just bravado. It is an expression of his need to be seen. When Firicel and Celentano mock him, their laughter hides envy and affection. The humor is layered. It works both as surface comedy and as emotional camouflage. This is perhaps why Las Fierbinți remains so resonant after all these years. It understands that laughter in small communities is rarely pure. It is both shield and weapon, both bonding ritual and quiet rebellion against despair. The pacing of Aroncarea cu ciocanul partea tiu is deliberate. Nothing happens quickly. Scenes stretch, pauses linger, conversations circle back to where they began. This slow rhythm is essential, not accidental. It mirrors the temporal experience of the countryside, where time expands and contracts around trivial events. A hammer throw can become the highlight of a week. A minor argument can evolve into local legend. The show respects this rhythm, refusing to rush toward resolution. In doing so, it captures a truth about existence itself. Life's meaning is often found not in progress, but in repetition. There is a particular scene that stands out as emblematic of this philosophy. After several failed attempts, Branzoi prepares for one final throw. The crowd hushes. The camera closes in on his face. He squints, inhales deeply, grips the hammer, and spins awkwardly before releasing it. The hammer barely flies. It lands pitifully short of the mark. For a moment, there is silence. Then laughter erupts. Not cruel laughter, but affectionate. Branzoi, catching his breath, laughs too. In that laughter, all tension dissolves. The competition, the pride, the humiliation, everything becomes irrelevant. What remains is connection. It is as if, through shared absurdity, the villagers rediscover their humanity. This scene captures the moral heart of the episode, that failure, when shared, becomes joy. Another compelling layer of the story is its subtle social critique. The villagers' obsession with creating their own mini-Olympics can be read as a parody of national identity and institutional inefficiency. In their attempt to imitate structure, they reproduce chaos. There are no clear rules, the measuring system is improvised, and arguments over fairness erupt constantly. It is a humorous reflection of how bureaucracy often functions in real life. Plenty of rules, little order, and endless debate over who is to blame. Yet, unlike the real world in Fierbinți, this dysfunction is charming rather than tragic. The absurdity becomes a form of freedom. Nobody is truly accountable, so everyone can laugh and start again. In that sense, the village embodies a paradoxical utopia, inefficient but happy, chaotic but kind. The women in the episode once again anchor the story in realism. Stella's attempts to maintain order, Aspirina's pragmatic hustle, and Giannina's subtle skepticism all provide contrast to the men's childish competitiveness. The women observe, comment, and often guide events from the background, their intelligence and restraint forming the silent structure beneath the chaos. The episode's gender dynamics reveal a quiet truth about rural life. Men may make noise, but women keep the world turning. This unspoken balance gives the narrative texture and emotional depth. It also hints at the broader theme of endurance, the feminine capacity to adapt and preserve in the face of endless repetition. Beyond its social and comedic brilliance, Aruncarea cu ciocanul, partea dui, is a meditation on identity. The villagers define themselves not through external validation, but through each other's eyes. Their world is small but complete. Every action, no matter how insignificant, matters because it happens within a shared framework of meaning. This is why the hammer competition feels monumental to them. In a globalized world that constantly tells people they are small, Fierbinți rebels by insisting that its smallness is enough. That insistence, expressed through laughter, through failure, through absurd rituals, is the essence of the show's philosophy. On a more personal note, the episode reminded me of the timelessness of provincial life. Growing up in a small town, I recognized the dynamics, the endless gossip, the exaggerated events, the way everyone becomes both actor and audience in a play that never ends. Watching Las Fierbinți, especially episodes like this, feels like revisiting that theater of ordinary life. The faces may change, the accents may differ, but the emotions are universal. There is always a Branzoa trying too hard, a Firițel mocking to hide insecurity, and Aspirina turning chaos into opportunity. This is why the humor feels so authentic. It is drawn from lived truth. The ending of the episode is masterful in its understatement. As evening falls and the villagers disperse, the hammer lies forgotten in the grass. The field grows quiet, the light softens, and the last conversations fade into murmurs. Nothing has been achieved. No one remembers who won. Yet there is peace in the air, a strange contentment born of shared experience. The competition has served its purpose, not as sport, but as ritual. It brought people together, gave them a reason to laugh, to argue, to feel alive for a few hours. In the silence that follows, the essence of Las Fierbinți reveals itself. The beauty of futility, the poetry of doing something pointless with sincerity. This thematic conclusion ties deeply into the broader vision of the series. Las Fierbinți has always been about the persistence of humanity in forgotten corners. It shows that dignity is not reserved for the successful, that wisdom can come from fools, and that laughter can be as profound as prayer. Aruncarea cu ciocanul, partea dui, embodies these principles with rare clarity. It teaches, without preaching, that meaning does not need to be monumental. Sometimes, it is enough to throw a hammer into an empty field and believe, even for a second, that it matters. What makes this episode artistically significant is its refusal to conform to narrative expectations. There is no climax, no moral resolution, no transformation. Instead, there is continuation, the sense that life goes on exactly as before. This structural choice reflects a profound understanding of the human condition. Most lives do not change dramatically. They unfold in cycles of small victories and comic defeats. By honoring this cyclical truth, Las Fierbinți achieves something that many grand dramas fail to do. It portrays reality not as tragedy but as comedy infused with grace. The emotional resonance of the episode comes not from what happens but from how it feels. The laughter of the villagers, the sunlight over the field, the dust rising after each throw, all these sensory details create a world that feels tactile and alive. The audience is not merely watching, they are present. They can almost smell the air, feel the rhythm of the place, and sense the quiet heartbeat of a community that refuses to vanish. In its artistry, Aruncarea cu ciocanul, partea 2, transcends its format. It becomes both a portrait of a specific Romanian village and a universal parable about resilience. Every viewer, regardless of origin, can recognize something of themselves in the awkward throes and unearned pride of Fierbinți's residents. They remind us that joy is not the absence of failure, but the ability to laugh through it. This is not just comedy, it is philosophy disguised as farce. The laughter it provokes lingers, not because it mocks, but because it understands. To laugh at Fierbinți is to laugh at oneself, to acknowledge one's own ridiculous hopes, to accept one's own limitations, and to find warmth in the acknowledgement. Aruncarea cu ciocanul, partea 2, may appear to be about a small competition in a forgotten village, but it is, in truth, a reflection on the grand absurdity of existence itself. The villagers, in all their imperfection, embody the human spirit, clumsy, proud, foolish, and endlessly enduring. When the credits roll, nothing seems resolved, yet everything feels complete. Life continues, the hammer waits for another throw, and the laughter echoes into the night like a prayer whispered to no one and everyone at once.